Through the Leadership Lens is brought to you by Thompson Autogas. Thompson Autogas is the industry's gold standard turnkey solution for all your autogas needs. From funding to refueling and everything in between, Thompson Autogas is there to support your fleet every step of the way.
Hello and welcome to another Through the Leadership Lens, a podcast presented by the Women in Propane Council. I am Freddie Riddler.
And I'm Bridget Kidd, and together we're your hosts. Today we are so excited to have a colleague and friend of mine on, Erin Hatcher, who is the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Communications for PERC. So Erin, welcome to our podcast. We're excited for the next, 3 or 4 hours that we have together. To kick us off, will you tell us a little bit about what you do at PERC and maybe a little bit about how you got there? And intertwined in there, what does leadership mean to you?
Sure. So, as you said, I'm responsible for marketing and communications. And what that means in terms of PERC's mission, I'm responsible for the consumer education piece of PERC's mission. So that means business audiences for all 6 of the markets that we support, from auto gas, agriculture, residential and commercial construction, material handling, and off-road, but also the homeowner market and environmental thought leadership. So speaking to academics, journalists, writers, reporters, leaders of energy companies.
Awesome. So we have a lot of guests on here who are leaders in the industry, but they have like their own teams that they work with. When I hear Senior VP of Marketing Communications, you're almost the leadership of the people that are listening and viewing and seeing all the marketing communications you're doing for PERC. How does that, tell us a little bit about how that broad of an area for leadership kicks in? Like, you don't have, I'm sure you got your teams and everything, but you're almost like a leader to the whole Propane Association with all the communications you're doing with PERC.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. And obviously, none of this work could be done without my team, which consists of 6 professionals, and they range from having 1 year in the industry to 14, at PERC, I should say. And in some cases, over 20 years in the industry itself. So there's such a wealth of information from my team that allowed me to kind of integrate into this brand new industry of which I knew nothing when I started 3.5 years ago. So leadership for this group has been very different from my experiences in the past. I've been able to provide some clarity, direction when it comes to actual marketing in this group. But in terms of learning the industry, I have relied heavily on my team to educate me, as well as my peers within PERC, to bring me up to speed with everything about the propane industry.
Erin, can you tell us a little bit? Obviously, there's a role or a function of leadership that is just management, right? An organizational structure. But what does leadership in a broader sense mean to you?
Leadership really started for me in the Army. First as an ROTC scholarship recipient in college, kind of learning the basics, and then becoming a transportation officer in the regular Army and really applying it to leading troops. It was a much more, in addition to having a cerebral component of educating and training, there was a real physical component too. So the approach I have always taken is very much a lead by example and participatory. So nothing that we would do in a mission that's military related could be done without everybody participating. So none of this delegating and walking away kind of business. Now, while the mission has really changed moving into a civilian career, the principles still apply, right? And no more than in this industry that I knew so little about, where listening to your team, learning from every person around you possible, and then again, leading by example, demonstrating the behaviors that you want to see reflected back.
Mm-hmm.
the integrity, the teamwork, the initiative, the follow through, the pride in work, things like that. So, I mean, I really approach it from a coaching perspective. Or that's what I try to do. And I see leadership, succinctly as empowering others to do things that they never thought they could possibly do, um, and holding them accountable and myself accountable to not only them but my peers and my own leadership. Um, the lessons I learned in the military have had such a profound impact on how I've led throughout my career, and I was grateful to have them.
Awesome. First of all, thank you for all your services. This is our second podcast we've had now with someone in the military. And it's interesting to hear some of those leadership skills that you've learned in the military that you got to use throughout your career. So again, thank you and everyone for their military services that they have done. So within the military, have you seen that leadership has changed at all between what you did in the military or the Army versus what you're doing now for PERC?
Oh, absolutely. And not being ever having been in the same office with my team at PERC, it's so radically different than anything I've ever done before. And obviously, we all had to adjust to that. But starting a job for the first time in a new industry with a new team remotely presents some challenges that are, well, they're daunting, right? I mean, to try to establish that kind of rapport that you need to with a team via Zoom is tough to do. And I'd like to say that I was able to do that probably because pretty early on in my time at PERC, we were faced with an extreme challenge of a rebrand of Propane in a very short period of time. So we all got extremely well acquainted through hours of Zoom calls and Friday nights and weekends, and the team just came together and really delivered and worked together seamlessly during a difficult time.
Yeah. Erin, when you look at that, and I would say less about the rebrand, but more about your initial onboarding, right? And like the making that decision to come to PERC, leave where you had been for not an insignificant amount of time. And you came to PERC, and can you talk a little bit about that risk? And we talk often on the podcast with our guests about the kind of how risk and leadership can often go hand in hand. And that maybe your perspective a couple years later on how you tried to mitigate that risk and maybe what you were feeling in making that decision to ultimately come here.
Yeah, it was a big decision. And I made my pros and cons list, and I considered all the alternatives. But what drew me to this position was not just my introduction to the few people in the hiring process, but learning about the industry of small business owners. That is the kind of work that inspires me, is seeing how people, through hard work, determination, put together a business and sustain it through generations. I find that really motivational. And having worked in major organizations that are enormous, like the U.S. Army, Kraft Foods, big conglomerates. And while my latest job wasn't exactly of that size, it certainly wasn't the kind of entrepreneurial business that this industry supports. So for me, that was really the draw. That and the opportunity to learn something new, and it was a risk because it's very different than food, but there were some opportunities to test my skills that I hadn't used in a long time, learn some new ones. So it has been overwhelming at times, but incredibly exciting.
I love it. One of the questions we have is what inspires you, and I've never heard anyone say it's small businesses. That's what the propane industry is all about. It's made up of so many small businesses, and it's not just the small business that's running their life. It's the drivers that they support, and it's the workers, the CSRs, the management, the service techs. It's just a long list of people that it's providing a lifestyle for. So it's really interesting to take that concept and say, I do my job for all the marketers in the industry. That's pretty powerful. And I wanted to say that again because I feel like you don't hear that a lot where people think of other people. So going off of that, a lot of time in your life or career, or in your case, going through the Army, there's always that one person that made a huge impact on you and your story. Could you share with us who's been a really big influential leader in your life, whether it was the Army or working at PERC or something like that?
Sure. There was a particular Army officer. He was the Army's version of a COO, called an executive officer, who I had the pleasure to work for when I was stationed in Italy. And very briefly, I had a pretty senior level non-commissioned officer who worked for me, and he was guilty of some poor decision making. Let's put it that way. Now, it wasn't worthy of a court martial in the Army, but it was worthy of an Article 15, which is a non-judicial punishment. So I initiated this proceedings because it involved lying and falsifying documents. So I had to go before this executive officer to make my case about doing something so serious to a pretty elevated, high-ranking enlisted officer. And I had one of the most impressive dressings down, to put it in a nice term, that I have ever received. But what it taught me is the importance of respecting that individual, what that individual had accomplished in his career, and to keep all of those factors in mind before bringing forward charges like this that would result in something unpleasant for him as an enlisted officer. Now, ultimately, he supported the effort and believed that it was the right way forward. But as a result, I had to promote somebody to take his position who is much lower rank. Well, with that comes additional risks, right? Mm-hmm. And where I stumbled was being so worried about his success in this new role that I did not allow him to fail and learn like I had learned and benefited from making mistakes. And I protected him, and I'd swoop in to make sure that everything that he did justified his assignment. And it was about a year into this that I learned my lesson from this same executive officer that, just like you learn, you got to let others do the same and let them learn from their mistakes. That's probably one of the biggest lessons of my career, and one that I have to remind myself every day when I'm working with my own team.
I think it's such an interesting recollection for what I would say oftentimes leaders want to do. You want to protect your team to not embarrass themselves, not embarrass you, not make your superiors question your judgment, when in reality you step in the way of somebody else's success and then magnifying the effort of the team or the organization or anyone else.
That's exactly right.
Erin, what do you think when you look back over your leadership style? How has it changed, and what caused those changes, if it's changed?
Well, that for sure has changed my approach to really listening to those early lessons. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. And in this case, set the vision, lay out the requirements, and then let them do their job. And if that means failing, so be it. You can help pick up the pieces afterward. So that is what I've really tried to focus on. And because I'll take risks, but I don't want them to fail. And it's just not a healthy approach. So,
Yeah. So, Erin, obviously through the leadership lens, the podcast is about leadership. And some people like the idea that they're considered a leader, and some people really don't see it, even though they are a true leader. Um, do you see yourself as a leader? Like, do you like that? Like, what motivates you if you being on this podcast and people seeing you as a leader? What motivates you to be in that role of, wow, I'm looked up as a leader in this company or industry?
I love having leadership roles, and because I love to try to help people achieve things that they didn't think they could do, and empower them to do that. Nothing pleases me more than to be able to promote someone. I just get great pleasure out of that, and to see them succeed in their role, even if
Good
it
for
means
you.
leaving my group, and moving on. I mean, it's very sad, but it's gratifying to see that people are growing and improving.
What about Erin? What do you do to not become stagnant in your leadership skills? I mean, certainly we work in an industry and an organization where there's constantly something, right? Good, bad, opportunities for reflection. But is there anything that you do to really hone those skills?
I like to read. I was chatting with Freddie before we started. I love biographies because I find them so instructive and inspirational to learn of stories of people who have overcome things to do great works in life. So that's a great source of inspiration for ideas to try to keep things fresh. And I love to do that with my teams too. Like pick a book, read it together, talk about it. Um, I wish we did more of that. And, it comes in waves based on whatever it is that we're tackling as a group. But we've done that where we have identified communication styles, and we've had a lot of fun reading books like that and discussing them together and identifying better ways of interacting with one another.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Go
Do you have
ahead.
a favorite book you'd recommend?
Um, Type talk at work is really, really fun for that purpose.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that.
Okay. What about, are you involved in anything within your community where you're able to demonstrate kind of leadership or learn more skills outside of a professional environment?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of them have not resumed after
Mm.
COVID, which is
Mhm.
Mm,
sad. But kind of back to that transformational, inspirational story. I used to teach ESL at night to new immigrants and to the like ones right out off the boat type of immigrant
oh,
that know nothing, very little English. And I just got such a kick out of watching them start to master English. And I was inspired by the fact that they held multiple jobs. And then that kind of transitioned into teaching citizenship classes to these same people. And I would be doing it to this day, except that a lot of those, they've all shut down. So, and
mm,
none of them have resumed.
Right. Oh, that had to
that's
have been
wild.
such an interesting
Yeah.
experience.
Well, I
You'd
couldn't
be
imagine the
amazed at how
stories.
much they know,
Yeah, I
and
could
more
imagine the
than
stories you heard about them too. Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I have a question I'd like to ask too, Erin. When, at what point of your life did you know that you were a leader? When did you know that you could give people that leadership role and have them trust you in your decision making?
it probably wasn't until college and when I first got a platoon and was at summer camp leading simulation maneuvers at military summer camp at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And there are things called leadership reaction courses where you are given a challenge, whether it's to cross some barrier or get your platoon through some kind of obstacle. And that was really the moment where I realized, this could be a good thing for me. I really enjoy it and get a lot of satisfaction out of doing it.
Mm-hmm. What would you say, and Erin, I feel we've had these conversations before, but I wonder for this audience, obviously it's the women in propane, but there's a much broader audience than women, but a lot of people who work with women. What would you say to women maybe looking at a potential risk, right? Maybe it's a new job, maybe it's a totally new career, maybe, you're starting a family and still trying to work. I mean, you've gone through all of those things, right? Each of the like check each of those boxes. What would you say to somebody who how to navigate those decisions and how to assess their situation versus you said before you made that pros and cons list?
Yeah.
I'm just so curious what you would say to somebody.
Um, I kind of go to two things. Well, I guess there's always the family as your third, but I really feel strongly that you should trust your gut and really listen to it, and not those voices that try to talk you out of what you really believe in your pit, in the core of your being. The other thing is to, if you haven't, find a mentor and get some career counseling and advice from that person, because I feel like that third person, that third party can provide so much clarity around a major decision that even your family sometimes can't quite separate themselves from. But ultimately, you got to go with what you really believe in. And you mentioned young women who are contemplating starting a family. I always tell them, not to borrow from a book title, but lean in. Do not lean back and think, oh, I'm not going to be worthy to you as an employer anymore. No, that's not it at all. Lean in and know that you're still going to be a very valuable contributor to the organization you're in, if not more so, because of your multitasking skills that you hone during motherhood and.
Yeah, I listened to a podcast on the side, and one of the comments was, and it kind of falls into this, was a lot of people keep their head down in their business. They want to keep your head down. They'll stay out of all the drama that's happening around them. And the guy said, you might as well watch for the stray bullet, because regardless if you see it coming or not, it's going to hit you. And it's good because, like you said, lean in, right? Just go out, go for it. If you have that gut feeling, why not? Like Bridget said, risk can be risk, but it also can lead to, something a better and above. And that's how you kind of get to the better part of your life, of taking those chances. So you are giving advice for viewers and listeners on this podcast right now. What's the best advice someone's ever given you, Erin?
Find a mentor.
Hey, speaking of mentorship,
without a doubt, yeah.
The Women of Propane have a great mentorship called the Knowledge Exchange. So if you're listening or watching this, check it out, www.womenofpropane.org, and check out the Knowledge Exchange and get a mentor today. There's my plug. I was waiting for that.
It's like it was scripted. I'm so impressed by that.
Beautiful.
I'm so impressed. All right, Freddie, are you ready to change it to be a little bit more fun? Not that this hasn't been very fun, but make it a little fun here.
Sure. So, Erin, this is called the whip round. We'll just hit you with a bunch of questions, answer them any way you want, whatever comes to your mind first. It's a lot of fun to kind of get to know who you are. So, Bridget, I'll kick it over to you.
What do you keep in the trunk of your car?
Running shoes, sunscreen, and a towel.
Where are you located with sunscreen? Where are you at right now?
I'm in Richmond, Virginia, but yes, my skin is susceptible.
I'm in Minnesota, so there's no need for sunscreen right now. That's why I had to ask.
Yeah, no, it's always in there, whether it's cloudy or winter, doesn't matter.
Got it. What is your favorite animal, Erin, and why?
Probably a dolphin. I love watching them. They're smart. They use tools. They communicate. They are self-aware. Yeah.
Wow.
That was quite an impressive answer, Erin. All right. What do you wish you would have known when you were 16 years old that you know now?
To not be so serious so early. That would be I wish I had known that just how long you were, and to just be young for a while rather than rushing into being ultra serious.
Mm-hmm. Yep. If you wrote a book about yourself or your career, what would the title be?
If it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. Lessons in moderation. That would be it.
Oh my God, Erin, that's fantastic. That is great. Well, I'm going to go off of that. Describe yourself in one word.
Oh, it's not the most flattering, but it's probably accurate. Intense.
Hey, I find that to be very flattering.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
If you were not in the propane industry, what would your ideal job be?
The easy answer would be to default to what I came from. But you know what? I think I would, if it couldn't be propane and where I am now, I would love to be marketing an outdoor apparel brand.
Interesting.
Go along with your sunscreen.
Yeah, right. And running.
Clothes that protects the skin.
All right. My last question, Erin, is describe your ideal vacation.
Wow, you've almost gotten the whole package, right? Ideal vacation would be with my family, some kind of extreme adventure, camping kind of vacation in a foreign country.
Mm-hmm. Anything planned?
Patagonia.
Nice.
Wow, good for you.
I just take Erin's trips and the experiences she's provided for her children, and I just write them on my list, and we're going to check them off one by one.
You will.
I know. One by one, we'll get there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Erin, so much for being on Through the Leadership Lens podcast. It's been a lot of fun. It's always great to hear stories about all these different wonderful people we have as guests. Anything you want to close on, Bridget or Erin?
Nope. Thanks, Erin. This was really fun. Much. Thanks for making the time for us.
Thank you.
Both.
This has been another episode of Through the Leadership Lens presented by Women in Propane. Be sure to subscribe, download, and share with a friend. To learn more about Women in Propane, visit us on Facebook, Instagram, or online at www.womeninpropane.org. I'm Freddie Riddler.
And I'm Bridget Kidd. Thanks for listening. Until next time.